She was standing in the dust, holding a torn plastic bag, wearing secondhand clothes, and nobody on that street gave her a second glance. But the man who was about to humiliate her in front of hundreds of people was about to make the single most expensive mistake of his entire life. Because that girl in the dust, she owned the building he worked in. It was a Thursday morning in Victoria Island, Lagos, Nigeria. The kind of morning that burns before it even begins. The air was already thick with exhaust fumes and the smell of fried akara from a nearby stall. Market women shouted across each other. Okada riders weaved between donfos. Children in school uniforms ran past adults who never looked down at them. Nobody noticed the young woman standing near the entrance of First Bank on Broad Street. Why would they? She wore a faded Ankara blouse. A cheap leather strap on her left foot had a broken strap she had carefully tied with a rubber band. Her hair was loosely packed under a plain head wrap. She carried a cracked Nokia phone in a plastic bag containing a small chilled sachet of pure water and a boiled egg wrapped in old newspaper. Her name was Zara, and she was, in that moment, completely invisible. Which is exactly what she wanted. Zara had flown into London 3 weeks ago after 6 years abroad, first at Oxford, then quietly running an investment firm she had started with seed money from her father at age 22. By 28, that seed money had multiplied into something that made financial journalists scramble for superlatives. But Zara didn't come back to Lagos wearing her wealth like a uniform. She came back asking a question, a dangerous question. She had watched too many videos online, read too many stories, heard too many accounts from her own employees about how they were treated when their clothes weren't expensive enough, when their car wasn't new enough, when their face wasn't the right face. So she designed an experiment. Simple, personal, and about to become very, very complicated. She would spend 2 weeks dressed as a woman struggling to survive in this city. No bodyguards, no driver, no designer bag, no phone that anyone would steal. She would take donfos, eat at roadside joints, stand in queues, ride on Okadas. She would live as the city lived, and she would watch how people treated her. The first week had been quietly painful. A pharmacist had talked to her like she was slow when she asked about medication for her mother. A bank teller had made her wait 40 minutes while processing other customers with better clothes faster. A landlord had laughed in her face when she'd inquired about an apartment in Lekki. But nothing had prepared her for Thursday morning. She had just helped an elderly blind man find the entrance to the bank. She walked him slowly through the crowd, guiding him by the elbow, speaking gently. When she stepped back out onto the pavement, she stumbled slightly on an uneven concrete slab. Her shoulder grazed the side of a car. Not a crash, not a dent, not even a scratch, just a graze. The lightest brush of fabric against polished metal. The car was a black Rolls-Royce Cullinan. License plate, Demola 1. The door opened before she had even straightened up. The man who stepped out was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal Savile Row suit that cost more than most Nigerians earned in a year. His watch caught the morning sun and threw a beam of light across the pavement like an announcement. His name was Adedamola Bankole Savage. Age 34. Occupation CEO of Savage Group. Oil, real estate, logistics, and 3 other industries he had crushed competitors in. Reputation: brilliant, ruthless, untouchable. He looked at Zara like you look at something you nearly stepped on. "Are you mad?" he said. His voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. It had the quiet authority of someone who had never once been told no. Zara looked at him. She looked at the car. She looked at the spot where her shoulder had barely touched the door panel.
"I'm sorry, sir. I stumbled." "You stumbled." He repeated it like she had said something funny. "You stumbled into a 45 million naira vehicle with your— What is this you're wearing?" He gestured at her with contempt. People had started to slow down. A few stopped entirely. "Sir, I barely touched." "Do you know who I am?" He stepped closer. "Do you have any idea what your entire existence is worth compared to the paint on this car?" Then he raised his hand, and he slapped her. Open palm, across her left cheek. The sound cracked through the air like a whip. Zara staggered sideways. Her plastic bag hit the ground. Her sachet of water burst open on the pavement. The street froze. A woman selling oranges nearby covered her mouth with both hands. A man in a danfo leaned out of his window, staring. 3 phones were already raised, recording. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody stepped forward. Adedamola straightened his jacket calmly. He looked at Zara like you look at something you've already forgotten. "Learn your place," he said quietly. Then he got back into his Rolls-Royce and drove away. Zara stood on that pavement for a long moment. Her cheek was burning, her ears were ringing. She could feel every single pair of eyes on her. She bent down slowly, picked up her broken bag, picked up her boiled egg that had rolled 3 feet away. She did not cry. She did not cry. She took one long, steady breath, and she walked away. But as she walked, something had shifted inside her. This was no longer just an experiment. This was now personal. Her full name was Zarafina Adeze Okonkwo-Mensah. Her father, Dr. Emmanuel Okonkwo-Mensah, was not just rich. He was the kind of rich that doesn't get talked about in newspaper lists because he preferred it that way. He owned infrastructure, ports, telecoms licenses, 3 private hospitals, 2 universities, and a sovereign wealth management fund that several African governments quietly used to stabilize their currencies. His personal net worth had never been publicly confirmed, but the Financial Times had once estimated it exceeded $12 billion. He was not a trillionaire in naira. He was close to one in dollars. But Dr. Okonkwo-Mensah had raised his daughter with a philosophy that was almost radical for a man of his position. Never let your money walk into a room before you do. Zara grew up without the usual armor of extreme wealth. She went to a regular secondary school until age 15, when her academic gifts made hiding her longer impossible. She was sent to the UK, quietly, under a scholarship cover story. She studied philosophy at Oxford, then finance, then she started her firm. Her father never made announcements about her. She didn't attend Lagos society events. She wasn't in the gossip columns. She was, by careful design, unknown. Until now. When Zara got home that Thursday evening, she sat in the quiet of her father's study, he was traveling, and she looked at herself in the dark screen of a turned-off television. Her cheek had swollen slightly. Not much, but enough. She thought about all the other women who had been standing where she stood this morning. Women who didn't have her father. Women who had no resources. Women for whom that slap was simply the price of existing in public while being poor. And something crystallized in her. She picked up her actual phone, the one she kept locked in the study, and made 2 calls. The first was to her lawyer. The second was to someone she had not spoken to in 3 years. We'll come back to those calls, because first, you need to understand who Adedamola Bankole Savage really was, and what he was hiding.
Adedamola Bankole Savage had not always been this man. He had grown up in Ajegule, one of Lagos's most unforgiving neighborhoods. His mother had sold second-hand clothes at the Oshodi market.
His father had driven a taxi until the car broke down and could not be repaired. They had lived in a single room that flooded every rainy season. Damola, that was what his mother called him, had been the brilliant, burning-eyed boy who the whole street watched with hope. He won a government scholarship to university, he studied engineering, he hustled, he clawed his way up through 3 failed businesses before the 4th one, an oil servicing company, hit at exactly the right political moment. And then he became someone else. Success had not simply changed Adedamola, it had convinced him that the life he had escaped was a disease, and that anyone still living it deserved to. He had become a man who believed, truly, deeply believed, that wealth was moral proof, that poverty was failure, that anyone who could not afford to dress well had simply not wanted it badly enough. He had forgotten Ajegule entirely, or so he told himself. But there was something else about Adedamola Bankole Savage, something that almost no one knew. His company was in trouble. Savage Group had overextended. A series of bad bets on an offshore oil contracts that were now being investigated for corruption, had left a 5 billion naira hole in the company's balance sheet. His banks were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. 2 of his largest investors had quietly sent letters requesting meetings. He had weeks, maybe less. The only thing that could save him was a refinancing deal, a massive capital injection from a new investor or partner. He had been chasing one lead for 6 months, a firm called ZAO Capital, based in London, secretive, extraordinarily well-funded, the kind of firm that could write the check that saved him. He had an appointment with ZAO Capital's representative in exactly 4 days. He didn't know who was coming. The firm never revealed names in advance. He had no idea, none at all. By Friday morning, the videos were everywhere. 3 different recordings of the incident on Broad Street had been uploaded to Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok within hours of it happening. By midnight, the #BroadStreetSlap had crossed into national trending. By Friday morning, it had crossed into international trending. The videos showed everything: the stumble, the confrontation, the raised hand, the slap, the woman falling sideways, the bag hitting the ground, the water bursting open, the man smoothing his jacket and walking away. The plate, Demola 1, was visible in 2 of the videos. Nigeria identified him before noon. The comments were explosive. Women sharing their own stories, men condemning him, international media picking it up. A Nollywood actress with 40 million followers reposted with the caption, "This is what happens every day to our sisters who can't fight back. We will not be silent." Adedamola's PR team was in crisis. His phones were ringing without stop. 2 of his board members called to express concern. One of his investors, a British private equity firm, sent a formal email requesting clarification. But nobody knew who the woman was. In every video, her face was partially turned. Her head wrap, her simple clothes, she was anonymous. Just a woman. Which somehow made the outrage even more powerful. Zara watched the videos from her father's living room. She watched the world defending her, and she felt something complicated, something she hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, grief. Because how many times did this happen with no camera? How many women had no video, no trending hashtag, no Nollywood actress to repost? How many slaps had simply dissolved into the noise of a busy street, unremarked, unrecorded, and quietly survived?
Now here is where the story becomes something more than a viral moment, because on Saturday morning, Zara received a message. It came from someone she had trusted, a close friend, a woman she had known since her Oxford days, named Ifeoma. The message read, "Zara, I know it was you in that video. I recognized your ankle scar from the photo you posted last year. I've been approached by a journalist offering 3 million naira for your identity. I wanted to tell you first, but Zara, I'm really struggling right now. I don't know what to do." Zara read the message 3 times. Ifeoma had been her closest friend for 7 years. They had studied together, traveled together. Zara had lent Ifeoma money twice without being asked to repay it. She had written a reference letter for Ifeoma's visa. She had been the one Ifeoma called at 3 in the morning when her relationship collapsed. And now, Ifeoma was telling her, not quite asking permission, not quite making a threat, but telling her with a thin veneer of loyalty painted over what was very clearly a warning that the betrayal was already halfway done. Zara did not respond immediately. She put the phone down. She went to the kitchen. She made herself a cup of tea. She stood at the window and watched the gardener outside trimming the hedges in the morning light. And then she made a decision that would surprise everyone who thought they knew her. She called Ifeoma. "Ife," she said quietly when her friend picked up. "How much do you need?" Silence on the other end. "Zara, how much do you actually need? Not for this, not for the journalist, for whatever it is you're struggling with. Tell me the real number." Ifeoma broke down crying on the phone. She told Zara about the medical debt, her younger brother's surgery, the landlord threatening eviction. The 3 million from the journalist had looked like a lifeline in a drowning life. Zara listened to every word. Then she said, "I'll take care of the surgery in the rent, but Ife, you cannot sell my name. Not because of what it will do to me, because of what it will do to you. People who sell their friends for money don't get to be happy afterwards. I've watched it happen." Another long silence. "Why are you being kind to me?" Ifeoma whispered. "After what I almost did." "Because I know what desperation looks like. I've been studying it for 3 weeks." The journalist never got the name, but the woman in the video remained anonymous exactly 48 more hours. After that, everything changed. Tuesday morning, Savage Group boardroom, 31st floor. Adedemola had spent the weekend in damage control. His PR team had issued a statement calling the incident a private misunderstanding that has been significantly mischaracterized. The statement had made things worse. Legal had advised him to say nothing more until they understood the exposure. But today was the meeting. ZAO Capital. His lifeline. He had dressed carefully, shaved close, worn his most conservative suit. He needed this investor more than he had ever needed anything. More than the scholarship, more than the first contract, more than the car or the watch or the apartment in Banana Island. His assistant knocked at 9:58 and said, "Your 10 o'clock is here, sir." "Send them in." The door opened. She walked in, wearing a fitted charcoal blazer and white trousers. Her natural hair was out. She wore no jewelry except a single pair of small gold earrings. She carried a slim leather portfolio and moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who has never once needed to rush. She sat down across from him at the boardroom table. She opened the portfolio. She looked up at him. Adedemola Bankhole Savage felt the room tilt. He knew that face. He had seen it 4 days ago on a pavement on Broad Street. The head wrap was gone. The broken sandals were gone. The plastic bag was gone. But the face and the eyes were exactly the same. Zara looked at him for a long, steady moment. Then she said very calmly, "Good morning, Mr. Bankhole Savage. My name is Zarafina Okonkwo Mensah. I represent ZAO Capital.
I believe we have a lot to discuss." The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. Nothing came out. Zara did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply looked at him with the patience of someone who had prepared very thoroughly for this exact moment. "I have reviewed Savage Group's financials. ZAO Capital has the capacity and, provisionally, the appetite to structure the refinancing your company requires. The terms are in the document in front of you." She slid a folder across the table. He didn't pick it up. "Miss Okonkwo-Mensah," she said simply. I need to—" He stopped, started again. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything right now. Take the document, read it. But I want you to understand something before this meeting goes any further." She leaned forward very slightly. "I am not here to punish you. I am not here for revenge. I am not the woman from Thursday morning on that pavement. Or rather, I am exactly that woman, but that is not why I'm here today." She paused. "I'm here because Savage Group employs over 9,000 people, because its collapse would affect supply chains that touch hundreds of thousands of families, and because my father taught me that capital, used wisely, is an act of service." "But I also need you to understand," she said quietly, "that the terms of this deal include a mandatory corporate governance restructuring, a code of conduct, mandatory ethics training for all senior leadership, and a full, public apology, not to me personally, but to the woman you saw on that pavement, because as far as the world knows, she is still anonymous. And that apology is not about optics. It is a condition of the deal." Adedemola Bankhole Savage sat very still. He was a man who had spent 15 years building a fortress of wealth and arrogance, and in 9 minutes, a woman he had publicly humiliated walked through the front door of that fortress with the only key that could save it.
The meeting ended without a decision. Adedemola asked for 24 hours. Zara gave him 48. That evening, sitting alone in his car in the basement of his building, Adedemola did something he had not done in years. He called his mother. His mother, Mama Damola, as the old neighbors still called her, was 63 years old and still lived in Ajegunle. He sent her money every month. He had offered to move her out. She always refused. She said the house had good memories and she was not interested in living somewhere that felt like a show. "Mama," he said when she picked up, "I need to tell you something." He told her what he had done. All of it. The street, the car, the slap, the woman. His mother was silent for so long he thought the call had dropped. "Mama." "I am here," she said slowly. "I am trying to remember where I went wrong with you." "Mama." "Do you remember Iya Sekirit?" his mother said. "The woman who sold beans on our street when you were young? The one who used to give you extra because she said you looked like you had a bright future?" "Yes," he said quietly. "That woman was always somebody's daughter, somebody's mother. She was always wearing old clothes because she was putting every naira into her children's school fees, and she was still more dignified than anyone I have ever seen in a fine suit." A pause. "You came from us, Damola. You came from people like her. How did you forget that?" He didn't have an answer. He sat in his car for a long time after the call ended, in the dark, in the basement, in the silence, and slowly, something that had been sealed for a very long time began to crack open. Because here is the secret, the one that Adedemola had never told anyone, not even himself, for 15 years. He had not escaped poverty. He had been running from it in terror ever since.
And every cruelty, every arrogance, every slap, metaphorical or otherwise, had been the desperate act of a boy from Ajegunle trying to prove to himself he would never go back. It was not power, it was fear. The next morning, Zara was at the Okonkwo Mensa Foundation office in Ikoyi. The foundation ran a community clinics across 3 states. Zara had been working there quietly since returning, her real reason for coming home, beyond the experiment. At 10:15, her phone rang. It was the foundation's medical director. His voice was tight. "Zara, we have a situation at the Ajegunle clinic. A child, 7 years old, suspected appendicitis that has progressed. He needs emergency surgery and a blood transfusion. The government hospital says they can't take him for 6 hours. Private hospitals want an upfront payment the family cannot make. We have the surgical capacity at our clinic, but we're short 1 unit of AB negative. It's the rarest type. The boy's name is Temi. He has maybe 2 hours." Zara was already standing up, reaching for her keys. "I'll handle the blood," she said. "Start prep." AB negative. She knew that type. It was rare. She knew of exactly 1 donor in Lagos who had given before, a registered rare blood donor whose details were in the foundation's emergency network. She pulled up the name on the screen. The name on the donor registry was Adedemola Bankole Savage. Zara stared at the screen. She had 47 minutes. She called him. He picked up on the second ring. "Miss Okonkwo Mensa." "There's no time. I need you to listen to me." She told him about Temi, about the blood, about the 2 hours, about the fact that he was the only AB negative donor currently active in the city. Silence. "The child is from Ajegunle?" "Yes." "I'm already getting in my car." He arrived at the clinic in 22 minutes. He gave the blood. The surgery took 54 minutes. Temi came through it. Adedemola sat in the waiting room of a small community clinic in Ajegunle, the same neighborhood he had fled from, the same streets he had been ashamed of, and waited. With no camera crew, no PR team, no Rolls-Royce visible. Just a man in a chair, hoping a child he'd never met would be okay. When the doctor came out and said Temi was stable, Adedemola put his face in his hands, and he wept.
3 days later, Adedemola Bankole Savage held a press conference. Not the one his PR team had prepared. He fired that script the night before. He stood at a podium in front of cameras and journalists and said, without notes, "Last Thursday, I committed an act that I cannot justify, excuse, or soften with language. I struck a woman in public for the crime of accidentally touching my car. I spoke to her with contempt I had no right to. I treated her humanity as something beneath my notice." He paused. She was in fact an extraordinary intelligence, integrity, and generosity, who has since shown me more grace than I deserve. But that is not the point. The point is that it should not have mattered who she was. It never should have mattered, and the fact that it took discovering her identity to shake me is its own indictment. I grew up with nothing. I know exactly what it feels like to be invisible, to be treated like you don't matter. I was so afraid of ever going back to that feeling that I became the person who inflicted it on others. And that is something I will spend the rest of my life working to correct. He announced 3 things. First, Savage Group would establish a 500 million naira endowment fund for the Okonkwo Mensa Foundation's community health clinics. Second, he would personally fund the construction of a blood bank in Ajegunle, dedicated to Temi, the 7-year-old boy whose life required the rarest blood type in Lagos. Third, he would resign as sole decision-maker of Savage Group and bring in a board of independent directors, a condition, incidentally, that was already written into ZAO capital terms. He did not reveal Zara's name. She had asked him not to. The woman from the pavement remained anonymous, which, in the end, was perhaps the most powerful thing of all. The ZAO capital deal closed 6 weeks later. Savage Group was restructured. 9,000 jobs were saved. Temi recovered fully and went back to school. Zara completed her experiment. She published the findings, not with her name attached, but through the Foundation, as a comprehensive report on how poverty is perceived and treated in urban Nigeria. The report was cited in 3 parliamentary debates and adopted as a policy reference document by 1 state government. Ifeoma's brother had his surgery. She remained Zara's friend, a better, more honest friend than before, she often said. As for Zara and Adedemola, they met several times after the deal closed, formally at first, then occasionally for coffee, the way 2 people do when they have been through something that few others could understand. One afternoon, sitting outside a small cafe near the water in Lagos, Adedemola looked at Zara and said, "Can I ask you something?" She looked out at the water for a moment. "You can ask," she said. "Why did you still take the meeting? After what I did, you could have walked away. You had every reason." Zara looked out at the water for a moment. "Because my father told me something once. He said, the most expensive thing you can ever do with power is waste it on punishment when you could spend it on change." She looked at him. "You still had 9,000 people depending on you. Temi still needed that blood. The experiment had already answered my question. All that was left was the choice of what to do with the answer." He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, what was the question? The one the experiment was trying to answer? She smiled faintly. Whether people could change, whether what's underneath the fear and the cruelty and the arrogance was still human, whether grace given freely to someone who hadn't earned it could do something that punishment never could. He looked at her. "And?" he said quietly. "What was your conclusion?" She picked up her coffee. "Still running the data. Ask me in 10 years.
She could have destroyed him. She had every weapon, every reason, every right. But she chose to build instead. In the man who slapped her in the dust of a Lagos street, the man who once ran from poverty so hard he became its cruelest imitator, saved a child's life with his own blood. In a clinic in Ajegunle, in the neighborhood he had tried to forget. So here is my question for you, and I want you to answer this honestly in the comments. If you had been Zara, if you had been the one slapped on that street, would you have taken that meeting? Would you have made the call that saved Temi? Or would you have walked away, let the company collapse, and called it justice? Because here is what this story is really asking. What is stronger, the power to destroy someone who hurt you, or the power to choose not to? Tell me what you would have done. I read every comment, and if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. I'll see you in the next one.